I never read. I spent the better part of a decade of my adult life not reading pretty much anything. And then these three things happened kind of unintentionally that just made me do a 180. And as I've been thinking about that recently, it just occurred to me that these three things could probably help just about anyone become a reader. And so if you're somebody who wants to start a reading life or cultivate your reading life, I think these will actually be really helpful for you. So for me, it all started when my curiosity essentially started waking up. And I say waking up because we all start out curious. Like if you don't have any kids, then just go be around some and you'll find out that they're very curious. They're constantly asking questions, and not just like trivial or, annoying questions. They ask some really like deep and profound questions. And then somehow as we start growing up, we lose that. I don't know if that's like a societal thing or maybe it's just the natural progression of life. One way or another, probably some combination of the two, we tend to lose that curiosity. And I certainly did to a large degree. And so my curiosity started waking up when I started to gain an appreciation for the differing worldviews, the different ways of understanding the world. Like I had always known that there are a lot of different ways of thinking about this thing. And I myself had changed from earlier on in my life. I had a different worldview at this time than I had previously. But I started really appreciating the ways in which these sort of compete with one another, the differences between their claims, and that there are a lot of really smart people who believe a lot of really different things. And as I thought about it, I realized I couldn't really defend my own beliefs. Like I had failed to ask some pretty important questions. And that led to the realization that like I could be wrong about a lot of really important things. And that drove curiosity for me. And this can look different for everybody, the thing that piques your curiosity or gets you going forward. But ultimately, finding that thing that makes you curious about learning, that drives you to want to learn. If you can find that, you are well on your way to starting to develop and cultivate a reading life. And so for me, that didn't happen right away because I didn't actually realize that reading was the way to go about that. In fact, I'll probably make another video about that at some point. But eventually I figured out that reading was actually an indispensable means of evaluating truth and growing and learning and all of that. And so my curiosity started waking up. I realized that reading was a way to satiate that curiosity, not just in a vain or trivial way, but to find some really important things that I was after. The problem was that I started reading, but I still wasn't a reader. So I would read some, but my book selections were kind of all over the place, and they were very, not just sporadic, but spaced out. And so I was maybe reading like 2 or 3 books a year and just couldn't really get into a rhythm of being an actual reader. And that's when the second thing happened, which was a really simple calculation that I did in my home office one evening. That calculation was, became curious, like what would happen if I just read 15 minutes a day? Like that seems really doable. If I read 15 minutes every day, what would that translate to? And so if you do the math, 15 times 365, that's roughly 5,400 minutes. If you take 5,400 minutes and divide it by 2 minutes per page, which is a pretty reasonable reading speed, then that comes out to 2,700 pages a year. And if you assume the average book is about 1,800 pages or 180 pages, then that gets you to 15 books a year. And so basically I did this calculation, I changed the variables a little bit, and it came to like 10 to 20 books a year. Like 15 minutes every day would get me 10 to 20 books a year. And at the time, that was mind-blowing because I had never done anything like that. Again, I read maybe 3 books in the last 12 months at this point. And so doing that calculation showed me what was possible. Like with a little bit of discipline and a little bit of consistency, I could really start making gains on this and really develop something that I would now refer to as a reading life. And so from that point forward, I started reading more. So I was reading more often, reading more books, but I still had an issue with being disciplined and reading at the rate or the amount of material that I really needed to be engaging with. And that didn't change until the third thing happened. And that third thing was that while I was out driving one day, a friend of mine who knew me and kind of knew that I was reading and thinking a lot gave me a call and said he was thinking about starting a group of people meeting together who would try to read some of the older and really important, maybe some of the more difficult or challenging books, and asked if I would be interested in that. That was like a massive understatement. Would I be interested? So yes, I was definitely interested. And from that point on, we started forming this group together. And as soon as that happened, as soon as I got into this sort of little micro reading community, I instantly was reading a book every single month, because that's what we agreed to do. We would read a book and then meet and talk about it every month. I didn't realize this at the time, but that's a book club. I'd never been in one before. That's essentially what it is, or what it turned into, even though I didn't think of it that way. But joining that gave me the extra push to start reading enough so that I was doing at least one a month. And so now I was in that 10 to 12 a year. And then I would add on to that because there were other books outside of it that I still wanted or needed to be reading. But that third thing, that getting some form of sort of accountability with some other people who expected me to complete a reading amount of reading, was unbelievably helpful. And so if we think back through these 3 steps, the first thing is, again, that curiosity waking up. And this takes some exploration, I think, for some people at least. I mean, it can happen organically where something just kind of falls into your lap. That's kind of what happened to me. But otherwise, you might have to kind of explore around and see what really piques your interest. But once you find that thing and you're really curious about it, you really want to learn and understand something, that is the spark that you need to get this fire started. And then for me, it was doing the simple calculation. Roughly, you don't have to do the calculation so much as realizing that if you're consistent in your reading, you'll have big gains, that you'll be able to do quite a bit, accomplish quite a bit in it, opposed to small spurts of, you might read an hour one day, but then go 2 weeks without reading at all. Much better to do it consistently every day. So realizing that was really helpful for me. And then when I got in with a group of people who were doing something like that, that is what gave me the extra motivation I needed to really begin reading books more often. And honestly, because of the type of group I was in, it helped me read better books, because I wasn't the one picking the books. There was someone else who had done a lot more reading than me, who was suggesting, hey, let's read this next month. And so it was also really helpful in terms of directing what books I would be reading. And so my recommendation there would be, if you have a local bookstore or library, it's possible they already have interesting book clubs going on that you could join. If there's nothing like what you're really after, what would line up with the thing that's piques your curiosity, then maybe you have some friends that you could find and do it. The best thing is definitely to do it locally if you can, to get a group of people who physically meet and talk about it. But if you can't do that, you can also go online, like on Substack. There are tons of reading groups. We'll be doing some on my Substack as well. And so you can go on there and find a community that also helps to kind of keep you accountable and give you some direction in that reading. That third piece is really essential, I think. And so those 3 things caused me to do this 180 and really got my reading life off the ground, got it started. And then from there, over the next 6, 7, 8 years, I just kept developing it more, kept expanding on it and growing it. And now I read for about 10 hours every week, and I'm working on a pretty ambitious project for the next 3 years, reading through some of the greatest works in Western philosophy, history, theology, and literature. But that wouldn't have been a good starting place for me. It took some time to cultivate and develop a reading life in order to understand that was needed and the value of it, and to have the discipline and routines and reading capability to go after that kind of thing. And doing that has been extremely rewarding already. I'm roughly 7 months into that particular project. But in any event, developing a reading life is something I highly recommend and encourage you to do. And I hope that these 3 tips will be helpful to you in getting that started. So thanks for watching, and if you subscribe, you'll see me next time.